We did have a quorum. We are good. So the next item on the agenda is the Auckland Transport Update. So Stacey and Murray, the new Murray, sorry, and Andrew. Welcome. All yours.
Great. Thank you, Chair. And yes, I'm joined here today by Murray and Andrew. We've also got Roy online, so Roy will join us for the end part of the presentation today. So we'll take this as read, but we'll run through in terms of some of the highlights for the month. If my clicker works. So recent highlights in terms of the recent annual Varian Public Sector Reputation results that saw AT as a significant improvement in its overall reputation index from 52 in 2025 to 64 this year. And that is the highest increase the survey has seen in its 10 years of tracking. So we're about to receive a more fulsome report and be able to understand some of the metrics within that, which will give us a bit better detail in terms of how we shifted that dial and sort of what that means going forward. The local board satisfaction engagement result of 82% as well, which is an all-time high for us and something we're really proud of. We launched our first hybrid electric ferry on the 27th of May, and that's going to be in service in Devonport downtown this month. The Lake Road Belmont intersection improvements community engagement is underway. We finished the CRL evacuation testing with our partners Kiwi Rail, Auckland One Rail and City Rail Link Limited and Auckland Council. That saw over 1,500 volunteers participate from across the organisations, which was really neat, and I think that was sort of one of the takeaways was actually seeing everybody's enjoyment of that experience. Giving up their Saturday morning to come and participate was really cool, and just the joy that that brought in terms of the experience for them as well, so it was great to be able to share that. And the Carrington Road improvements with the sod tuning on the 15th of May have kicked off. In terms of public transport, we've had a couple of really good months, obviously buoyed by in terms of rising fuel costs that have directly correlated to improved patronage across the corridors. And so we had 7.2 million for the month of April. May again was high, and actually we've shrunk that gap in terms of our SOI commitment to 2.8% year to date. In terms of that target, that was as of mid-June, so it's getting very close. This week we've seen good patronage as well, so we're going to come very close to our SOI, so much better than what we thought we were going to land. Tertiary student patronage is up still, 36% compared to the same time last year. Farebox recovery is looking really good. It was actually 34 for May, so we will hit that target at the end of June, which is good. Operational performance is good. Cycling, again, probably buoyed by in terms of obviously investment in infrastructure that we've had, but also in terms of people seeking out other modes of transportation during the fuel situation. It has record levels in terms of cycling. So there's a number of media articles on that over the last 2 weeks, and I know Tanya did some radio on that this morning. So it's the best it has been in 10 years for May, as well as that April, and above what we saw pre-COVID when cycling was at its high. So very happy with that. In terms of public transport initiatives, we've got the safety bus ambassador trial underway that's going really well. We're getting really good feedback both in terms of the operating workforce on that and their presence, as well as from customers. The flexi stop's going really well. We want to look at expanding that. In terms of our bus driver screens, we're on target to have 80% of the fleet done by the end of June as planned, so that's over 1,000 bus driver screens retrofitted or on new buses. The Crime Stoppers campaign is being constantly reiterated, and we're getting good feedback on that as well in terms of touch points for people to be able to communicate easier with us. And rail safety indicators are improving with reductions in trespass, disorder incidents, and we've had no recent pedestrian level crossing incidents reported since December 2025. And you will recently notice that we completed the final in terms of those pedestrian level crossing works as well as we lead up into the city rail link. Now, I'm going to pass over to Murray, who's going to give us a brief overview in terms of the capital program.
Good afternoon. So the May capital results are actually sitting at 88% of the SOI target, which is 90%. We've still got 1 month to go in the financial year. Just something to note, the last 3 months have been the largest delivery months in AT history over the last 5 years and possibly longer. And this is currently represented in the forecast for the Forward Works plan as well to continue. As a little bit of a background to the capital delivery program, for your knowledge, it's structured into 5 portfolios that oversee all the programs and projects. And to give you a bit of background, one of those portfolios is renewals and resilience. If you just go to the next slide. And that's focused on flood recovery, resilience, road maintenance, and asset renewals. So it has a high delivery certainty and it has a really long-term outlook in its planning process, which is very successful. If you just stay back on renewals for a sec. So just some of the highlights for the year. They've actually completed over 4 million squares of resurfacing, which is over 480 kilometres of the network. It's 0.5% above the target, and that's due to increase next year by 15%. They've worked heavily with the ATOC to enable early ramp downs on our network, which has given us a 30% productivity uplift on night shift. And something to note is the renewals program actually modify their 50% of their program to accommodate Dig Once and all the other projects, not just AT, but third-party projects. Let's go to the next one. So one of the other portfolios we have is Public Transport One, which includes programs you'll be familiar with around downtown, bus optimisation, ferries, and the rail program. So in that program, the activity we're seeing at the moment is the Wellesley Street Stage 1 opening has been completed and public consultation feedback is under review for Stage 2. The inner Western Line level crossings engagement is due to start in coming months. As Stacey mentioned, EV1 is nearing handover and operational, and then the first hybrid vessel is preparing to enter service also. The 3 pedestrian crossing removals that you'll see across the network at the moment is Takanini, Te Mahia and Glen Innes. Those are preparing for construction completion in the next 2 months, and the new EMU Tranche 3 is continuing reliability tests. And Rosedale Station has been granted site access possession, so that'll be commencing on site very shortly. And just moving into urban development. So the cycling program overall has slowed a little bit this year, but there's been a big emphasis on business case reviews and uplift for the coming targets in the following years. GI to Tamaki Drive cycle pathway is progressing really well, albeit has minor delays, which we're working through now with the contractor. Eastern Busway Zone 5 has had a delay to start, and we're having some challenging conversations with Transpower in the reserve there around working alongside their services. A milestone to note, EBA has completed 80 kilometres worth of utilities work on that project to date, and it has 14 intelligent intersections planned to be installed before the project completes. Auckland housing program is progressing, and you'll note that it aligns with the briefing you've had earlier around Oranga Tamariki. Carrington Road is now in construction, and route protection has settled on 11 properties with 22 in final negotiations. So just moving on to the last one. So network and safety is the other program we have. Now this program is heavily reliant on local board interactions and the interface with Traffic Control Committee. It has the most amount of movement in it, and it also has the most amount of projects. So low value, high demand. So the community response program has exceeded its project targets this year. The network productivity has exceeded its SVL targets this year. There's 73 smart detection sites have been completed. traffic optimisation across 172 sites, with more on the way. The road safety has completed 58 projects with 22 further underway. And there's a big focus on network and safety at the moment around their FY27 pipeline for the annual program. And what also sits within this is the priority corridor for East Coast Base and Glenvale Road, which is in design development at the moment.
This next section, Andrew's going to take us through, but point to note, it's quite a lot of information condensed into a few slides, so we would suggest that we have a broader session on this topic in due course.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Stacey. So we did want to share with you some kind of key insights that we've got into essentially differences between special vehicle lanes and dynamic lanes, both of which are tools that we use on the network for optimisation. Special vehicle lanes are typically a static treatment. I think most people in the room would know what a special vehicle lane is. If you think about a T2 or a T3 lane, they are static treatments with predetermined times that they run for. They're, by comparison to dynamic lanes, much easier to install, and they're much easier for our customers, our road users, to understand than some of the dynamic solutions that we are looking to deploy onto the network. That means that they are typically more cost-effective, cheaper, and easier to implement. And by contrast, dynamic lanes require certain conditions to be in place on our network before they're appropriate for use. One of those conditions is around tidal flows, and hopefully most people in the room know what tidal flows are. That means we need strong peak direction travel flows so that we can reuse or reallocate underutilised parts of the road to flow in the same direction as the peak direction. That doesn't exist readily across many parts of our network. These dynamic lane solutions are also, by comparison to SVLs, a lot more costly. They tend to be much more reliant on technology investment, and they're more difficult to operate, maintain over time. That means that they are more costly as well when compared to special vehicle lanes. And there are a number of limitations that affect the ability to implement dynamic solutions. So the number of side accesses or roads coming into a section that you might want to put a dynamic solution into creates complexity. Pedestrian crossings within the route create complexity, all of which has to be dealt with when you're talking about dynamic solutions that change in real time. Flip to the next page. Just focusing on our program, when we kicked off the dynamic lanes as a solution some years ago, we looked at 180 candidate sites that we went through and evaluated. A number of those have now been delivered. Some have been parked because they don't have a benefit cost ratio adequate enough for us to be able to progress them. Some of those sites, quite a few of those sites, we have found lower cost alternatives to implement. So some of those sites, rather than implementing in a dynamic lane, we've looked to put in special vehicle lanes or other solutions. And some of those, or a good number of those 180 sites, were discounted as not being suitable for that sort or this sort of solution or treatment. We're now in the process of scoping up the work to go back and relook at candidate sites to inform future programs around dynamic lanes in particular. So we'll evaluate any of the sites we discounted several years ago because, of course, traffic patterns and volumes change over time. And so what we might have discounted previously may no longer be discounted. So that work is being scoped now, and we will use that to inform the building of a pipeline for more dynamic lanes into the future. We do have a couple still planned for next year. I'm not going to cover off the challenges there. I think I've spoken to some of them on the previous slide. I did want to draw your attention to some additional solutions, dynamic lane solutions that we are looking to explore. One of those is looking to utilise a special vehicle lane and ramp it up, so change it dynamically as demand in that lane changes. I.e., you might start off with a T3 lane, and as you end up with more vehicles, you start with the T2 lane, and as you end up with more vehicles populating the lane, it gets busier. You end up with a threshold where you go, okay, at this point in time, we'll change it to a T3 lane. So now the T2 vehicles can't use it, fewer vehicles can use it, and again, you can ramp that up to a bus lane at a point in the future. So we want to explore the ability to ramp up and down through the T2, T3 bus lane settings in real time, dependent on the volumes and the demand use of a lane. So that's something we're looking to trial and test. And then the other one that we're looking to expand into and look at is where we've got existing static special vehicle lanes, actually converting them to more of a dynamic solution. So putting dynamic tools in place so that rather running them as a bus lane or a T2 lane between 7 and 9 in the morning, we have the ability to go, actually by pushing some dials and buttons, we can expand the time frame by which that T2 or T3 or special vehicle lane can operate. That's really useful in managing things like incidents on the network where you might want to activate a bus lane, but you can't because it's outside of the normal operating times and the signs are static. So it gives us a lot more flexibility to utilise that space when you've got unusual behaviour or disruption on the network or in emergency situations. I'll move on. I did want to talk a little bit about some of the smart technology solutions we're utilising. Just click the slide. I'm not going to focus on Bus Booster. I think that's been socialised at this committee several times. Happy to take questions on it, but I do want to talk a little bit about advanced detection, and I do want to try and make this a topic and cover in a couple of minutes rather than probably more time, as Stacey suggests. But all of our traffic signals in Auckland operate on a system called SCATS, which is a Sydney Coordinated Adaptive Traffic System. That system, operating system, is only as smart as the information that feeds into it that determines how much green time is allocated to different movements at a signalised intersection. And one of the key limitations for us with our traffic lights in Auckland is that up until now, the vast majority of information going into that system was dependent on loops in the ground at the limit lines of an intersection. That, in this day and age, is not the smartest way to inform a system of what's happening on the road network sitting in behind it. So, simply put, you could have an intersection with 4 different legs. If a car is on a loop at each of the limit lines, the system looks at that and goes, there's equal demand on all 4 loops, on all 4 legs. The reality is 1 or 2 of those legs could have a much longer queue down it. The system doesn't really know how long that queue is. We get around that by putting more loops in further down the road. It's suboptimal. So advanced detection is giving us the ability, using CCTV and video analytics, to get much smarter information about what's happening at the intersection and feed that in addition to the in-ground detection loops. That means that the intersections can be operated a lot more smartly, automatically by the system, but also that information is useful for our operators if they're wanting to make manual changes on the network. So this is a huge opportunity for us, this advanced detection. It's not only for the benefit of detecting vehicles, as that kind of picture there shows, queue lengths, but also it allows us to detect cyclists, which the in-ground loops are not always the best at, and certainly to detect pedestrians, which we don't have loops for pedestrians. So it gives us a lot more quality information. That means we can make smarter decisions about optimising signalised intersections in real time. I'll move to the last slide very quickly, and it's a pretty easy one to cover off. It's really just a picture of, I've talked a little bit about certainly the advanced detection technology, but also with the bus boosters. That is really just a map of what we've achieved over the last few years through the implementation of both those advanced detection sites and also all the bus booster sites. So by the end of June, end of this month, we'll have 250 sites operational, live and deployed across the network, either with advanced detection or bus booster detection at intersections. And I won't dwell on that. What we've also been doing is working quite closely with our technology team on looking at how we could utilise machine learning and AR to further optimise and enhance the traffic signal lights that we've got deployed across the region. So I'm going to hand over to Roy, who, as Stacey mentioned, is online, Roy Cohen, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about the 2 pilots we've currently got underway. So Roy, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Everybody can hear me okay? Yeah, just
Yep.
want to apologise, I can't be there in person. Got cold. The cold has got me, and it's taken me down a bit, so I'd rather not share the love and again keep it at home. So going through with traffic light optimization, we have been working on a pilot in Botany and Lambie Drive, those the 2 key areas that we've targeted. And the targeting was a recommendation by our traffic engineers where we could get the most out of it. We've chosen 2 different vendors to work with on this pilot, JYW and Parsons. and in connection with Microsoft. As part of the pilot, JYW have an iterative approach to how they optimize. So they run through 1,000 scenarios, 1,000 iterations of how they can optimize a traffic light and an intersection, a corridor, and then a network. At the moment, we're just optimizing a corridor. The improvements we're seeing on the traffic light optimization for JYW looks to be at best 9%, which is it's not too bad, 2.7 minutes on a 30-minute trip. We are still in progress of putting in Parsons. It's a more complicated technical solution. However, there is more of a real-time integration into inputs, just like we talked about and Andrew suggested before around cameras and integration and seeing what the queue depth's in. Parsons one may have a bit more capability in that space and integrating with real-time. Both are looking promising. If it works well, we really would hope to see somewhere in the vicinity of 10 to 20%, but that's not necessarily at any point in time during the day, and it will really depend on how bad the traffic is at that point in time. However, this is expected to significantly improve the experience in a given network in any location. That's all I have really, unless there's any other questions.
Thank you, Roy.
Any questions?
Okay, so we have questions. So, Joe.
Thank you. Just in regards to dynamic lanes, special vehicle lanes, this is just a basic question, but can more be done in terms of signage and communication so people understand when you can use them? Because in some instances you can use the bus lane if you're turning, because there's no other way to turn when you're on a street. So that's my basic question, was just signage, communication, especially when we have move to more dynamic solutions.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, look, we can always do more around communication. A great deal of effort goes, particularly for dynamic lanes, a great deal of effort goes into the communication, because of course you're introducing something on the network that is unfamiliar to users of that part of the network. But I take your point around, I think, were you talking special vehicle lanes there, or are you talking both dynamic and special vehicle lanes?
I think it was a bus lane, the one on Hobson where you turn to come into Federal Street.
Yeah.
What is it? Yeah. And yeah, there's quite a few instances, especially with bus lanes, where you can drive into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. So one of the things that I think might help with that particular issue, I talked a little bit about exploring that ability to have some of our static SVLs turned into kind of a more dynamic solution. That involves putting in some of the tech that you see with dynamic lanes, so illuminated signage, potentially illuminated in-ground lighting. So there are mechanisms in a solution like that that allow you to make it a lot more interpretable for the user than if you've just got a static sign that says you can only use this lane between certain times. We all know that some of those signs have quite a bit of information on them, and it's quite a lot for the road user to interpret in a fairly short space of time. I think that some of the stuff, that the kit and the technology we deploy to dynamic lanes would have benefits in terms of its ease of understanding for customers.
Just one more thing. Thanks, Andy. Do you do any safety audits where you do have dynamic lanes, you know, with the X and the tick? And like, are people more at risk if you keep changing the lanes that have the X? You know what I mean? Like, because people are creatures of habit, right? So they'll just keep going, and some may not notice, oh, that lane is no longer a tick, it's an X. And they only notice when the other car is coming right at them.
So
yeah, like Pakuranga, Pamua.
So yes, we do. We do safety audits on them, and there's a huge amount of work that goes in up front trying to make sure that the tools that we deploy, and the reason we have X's and ticks is we've done a lot of work trying to understand what's the best way to socialise to people who use the network in a quick and easy way, when it's a lane that I can use, when it's a lane that I can't. So we use behavioural design specialists who help us with creating what the signage and the messaging looks like. But of course, we do a lot of trialling, testing, and auditing before and post-implementation. And we continue today to still run audits on all of the dynamic solutions that we've currently got out on the network.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you. I've got some questions around CRL testing. Is that all right? For this? Cool. Now, for the purposes of these questions, please pretend I am also Councillor Fletcher. We're both bringing these questions on behalf of, or alongside, the Disability Advisory Panel, who had some questions for us yesterday. Will there be a report on the plan for emergency evacuations for disabled people, including those with dementia and cognitive impairments, as well as physical impairments?
I will have to confirm back with you, but we had a range in terms of different accessibility scenarios, and we've actually just recently posted some reels on that, because we have a public transport accessibility advisory group who participated and continue to do so, as well as a broader network in terms of that. But yeah, I take your point in terms of have we encompassed all those other accessibility challenges that we may have. I will provide you with some information on it.
Thank you, and my apologies because I should have started with some members of the panel express their joy at some of those reels and had some positive feedback around some of that testing as well, and I had that positive feedback as well, so my apologies for not starting with that. The next question was around, I've got two more, hopefully quite quick, was a request for comms around station accessibility ahead of opening. Will there be kind of information on the website and coming out on socials that we can help share and send to networks and things like that? Is all that's to come, I presume?
Yes, absolutely, lots more to come.
Excellent. And the final question they had was around pre-opening tours. Now I know that there's first look at stations planned, and I know that at least one of those, or I've been told that at least one of those might be geared towards, might be a sort of low sensory option, which is awesome. The panel specifically raised blind, low vision and deaf communities and whether there was a pre-opening tour for those communities and others that might benefit from them.
Yes, no, we're definitely looking at how we can do that to make sure there is low sensory in terms of environment for particular users, to make sure they have the opportunity to participate in those as well, for sure.
Awesome. And again, I'd just like to thank you for the communications I received around some of the questions I had around station noise and things like that. That's been really fantastic. So well done. Thank you.
Wayne?
He's on green. You might be on red.
It's gone green. Those bloody greens. Thanks for that presentation. And I've got quite a few here. You did mention that dynamic lanes are more expensive than special vehicle lanes, but they're a lot cheaper than new roads, which is the comparison. So you're not competing with one, you're competing with the right thing. Now, I'm interested in knowing, is the work that you're doing there on dynamic lanes and braining things up, which I totally support and want sped up, is that part of the capital program or is that part of the operational program?
It's definitely part of the capital program in terms of its delivery and the operational program in terms of the ongoing maintenance operation.
I don't want to find that you've yourself lost out in a competition with the fellow beside you of his capital program, because yours is the best investment in capital. Why does each dynamic lane have to be approved by NZTA? I mean, they're our roads.
It's a great question.
It's not like they're particularly clever at anything.
Yeah, it's a great question. The reality is NZTA are the ones that are the regulator and have compiled the traffic control devices rules. So any control or way in which we utilise the road needs to comply with the traffic control devices rule. And dynamic lanes are not devices that are acknowledged under the TCD rule. Therefore, we have to go through NZTA and run every single one of those as a trial. Many of the ones we've got are still being run as a trial until NZTA get to a point where they are satisfied that it is a control that can be deployed more widely across the national network, only then will they build it into the traffic control devices rule as a device you can deploy on the network.
These are the idiots who have come up with the national ticketing system, which will turn out to be one of the greatest embarrassments of the last 10 years. I need some help to write a letter to the Minister to tell them this is just dumb. And we would like to have the ability to approve anything they do in our area. Say, for instance, one of the areas that needs to be smartened up is the demand management entrance onto the motorway system, because it just runs on a clock, and it's completely dumb. So, all right, I'm glad I asked that question. That's holding things up. In terms of the gantries and things, presumably for suspending the ticks and crosses, which does work very well. You only got to go up to Whangaparoa and see it works really well, and they do. Even the people up there have managed to learn how to do it. It's just posts and wire, really. It's not gantries. Gantries are expensive. Post and wire, both sides, is cheap. So don't get because I want this to happen. And then I noticed you get JYW and Parsons and Microsoft. We seem to have, we don't even ask for any Chinese companies to get in here. We're a sister city with Guangzhou. You won't learn anything from Sydney. Guangzhou has the best traffic flows in the world, and they're a sister city with us. And I want to see that we're having something a bit more than dud American software into the thing. Intersection optimisation is part of what's been happening via Steve and myself rather than the system, but that's where it's got to be. So there are a number of things that's not new. And if we're going to go for standardisation, we've got to have the ability for us to standardise, not have to go back to NZTA and agree with somebody in Wellington thinks we should standardise for Auckland. So that whole NZTA thing needs a good letter from me, which you're going to have to help me write. For intersection optimisation, as well as having more real-time information, just something like the pedestrian crossing time. Now, I recently was down to walking with 2 crutches, and you can't get much slower than walking with 2 crutches. And I can get across any road in 18 seconds, even at that speed. So we need to have a look, what is the pedestrian crossing time that we choose? Is it a standard? Is it chosen because it was the 25th of the month when we did it, so we had 25 seconds? We have some at 30 seconds, and we start 15 seconds before we count down 30. And the countdown encourages people to rush across in the last 5. So it's a non-safety thing, if anything. So I want to have some things in terms of intersection optimisation. I'm trying to get the amount of time that the centre of an intersection is not unused. We have some examples. All these things I'm talking about are within half a K of my office. The Barnes Dance crossing decisions that has advantages and disadvantages. We have them in some and not in others. I want to have be addressed about why we would do it in some places and not in others. We've actually got a Barnes Dance and one asymmetric square so that the length across the long one is bloody long. And so that holds everybody up because you've actually done that. And if you walk across that way, it's a long way, whereas if you go up and around, it isn't. So just questions about these. So we're looking to have a general improvement in the operation of our intersections right across the district. Now, one of the things that you're doing, they're a good start. I'm not criticising you here. I'm saying I'm encouraging you to be a bit more brave about it. But for instance, if you look at, we got approached by both Microsoft and Google to offer us a free technology solution. And I said, well, let's have how you can manage the traffic along Custom Street so that you don't end up with blocks that are empty that have got a green light and blocks that are full that have got a red light. You're supposed to have blocks that are full that have got a green light and blocks that are empty that have a red light if you're going to manage it. They've failed to do that. And so I still want that as being part of what you're looking at, and you might have to look at somewhere else. There are lots of other, the clever country in the world is China, not America at the moment. So get some input in there, and if we can't do it, just say so. We'll find someone who can. Those are kind of like the guts of it. I'm really trying to really encourage you, so don't feel bad about this. I want to give you more tools. I don't want to find that the guy, he's stealing your money just to put tar seal somewhere in a pothole of some place. This has a benefit, and don't wait for the government, because we none of us are that young. We've got to lead this ourselves. And so I've asked questions and led you a bit on that. Last one is slightly different in here, which probably comes back. At Westhaven Drive, there's some works down there which weren't attributed to anybody, but it turned out to be that they are due to, is it Chorus or some great big thing, big square box down. Westhaven Drive is an entrance to both Westhaven and onto the motorway bridge. It's a great, huge amount of work there with fences all over the place, with no indication of exactly who, no indication of whether or not that's got a TTM approved by us. It's not an AT job, I know that, but there's a fence. The staff there stopping people who don't have particular skills to integrate with how the impact it has on crossing the Harbour Bridge. And they've now put down a permanent corrugated steel protector. Well, the question is, has it got TTM? Are we approving it? How are we controlling the other access to our main roads that are other large infrastructure producers, and that's got a real ability to impact things because it's right at the entrance to the motorway. So can we find out an answer about that one? I don't expect you to know that now, but
Yep.
And can we check to see when those really big, long, heavy things there, is that have they approved, a TTM approved under the new risk-based rather than the old one? Because it looks to me like it's the old one there. And to have a main entrance to a motorway, to the bridge, controlled by some well-intentioned bloke with a bloody stick, strikes me as being the opposite of the integrated high-tech solutions I'm trying to get. Thank you.
Thank you. Desley?
Thanks, Andy, and thank you. You've got some good results in here. A few questions for me. First of all, what do you put down to the success for your local board engagement result? Do you think it's a result of the fact that we've given direction to do what local boards want you to do and not do what they don't want you to do?
I think it was just in terms of the engagement strategy overall, and sort of engaging early, working with them in terms of their prioritisation, and in looping back with frequency and making sure they're included in anything that was happening within their community. And it's definitely changed a lot over the last number of years in order to sort of raise the bar on that. There's still work to do, there always will be in terms of that, but it's definitely listening more.
That's great. What's the KPI on that percentage? Can you remember?
Oh gosh. Yeah, it was 70,
So you're
75.
well above the...
Well above
okay,
it,
good,
yeah.
Okay, thanks. My second question is on cycle numbers, good results on cycle numbers. Are you finding that right across the region? Because obviously you've got counters at certain locations, or are you noticing an increase in cycling in certain places?
I think right across the region, but definitely where there's been investment in the infrastructure, that sort of shows through. We can do a breakdown though, that'll show you by the counter so you can see the trends on each, and we'll share that around so everybody can see.
Really interested in that, thank you. I'm a great believer of dynamic laning, right? I think that's it's a cheaper way of getting congestion sorted quickly. I'm aware that there are some parts of Auckland that have said no to dynamic laning in the past and that may wish to rethink that. So I'm interested in how you're prioritising that dynamic laning or that use of smart technology solutions, whether it's the with the crosses and the ticks, or just, you know, no parking and doing it whichever way. How are you prioritising that list of streets or roads or arterials for dynamic laning?
I can answer that in a complex and a simple way. The simple way is it really comes down to benefit cost. Is the benefit very significant, and what is the cost relative to the benefit? So we'll target the highest return projects, those that offer the biggest benefit at the least costs. And very happy to bring back an assessment of all of the sites we've looked at. Very happy to share quite openly and transparently where we land in relation to those assessment of the candidate sites and why.
Look, I think that's the right solution. What I'm just trying to say is sometimes if you've asked something 5 years ago, times have changed, right? And so it's always a good idea to relook at the original sites that you looked at and why, and frame it up if you're having a look at the whole thing again.
Absolutely. And one of the things I did say earlier was travel patterns and volumes change over time. So what may not have been a pass mark back then may very well be a pass mark now, so to speak. So it's a good point you make. Yeah.
And just finally, Chair, if I may, I think the whatever the official term is for getting the buses to go through the lights faster or more frequent than the cars is the key to it. Because at the moment there is still, especially on the last routes into the city, it is still almost faster to go by car, because once a bus is full and it's stopping all the time, the cars go faster, right? And at the end of the day, there's cost, sure there's cost, but there's also time. And if people know that the bus is faster, that tends to sway just as much as cost, I would think. Well, certainly it has a weighting, right? So I, strongly support that, certainly as closer you get into town. Thanks.
Thank you, Desley. Kent. Thank you. Just for my clarity, you guys are talking as the old AT or the new AT or the Infrastructure Directorate?
We're today's AT.
Today's AT. Okay, so much of the questioning here right now is going to move into the Transport Directorate of Council, correct? And so the conversation will just move with you guys to that place, is that correct? Okay, thank you. So the new AT, tomorrow's AT, will be in charge of just the buses, and will they be in charge of the purchasing of the buses and the designing of the vehicles suitable for the runs?
Yes, absolutely. And I know you probably want to talk about Langhome.
Yes, I do. So you are obviously aware, it's
yeah.
you know, in 2018, when I first got on the local board, downstairs, a couple of floors down here, we talked about appropriate sized vehicles, not just for our area, that's what's under my nose, but for other areas of Auckland. When's this going to happen? Because we've got a driver problem and a vehicle size problem, and it's having an effect on the road, the capital replacement roading costs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of our rural roads, like in Langhome, are not suitable for extra large buses. So they did have extra large buses running on them at one point. They were reduced to large. They've now been specified as medium, but we're trialling a little small bus. I can't remember how many seats they have. I think it's about 13 seats. And there's one coming in July in order to trial that on that particular route to give it some flexibility. So what we're seeing in recent days was a mix of new drivers, but also in terms of some of the roading diversions that they've had out there have caused a lot of confusion for bus drivers it was actually the storm repair work that was happening out there. So there were some diversions that sort of added to that. So yes, there are smaller buses coming in order to not impact in terms of both user experience, but also the driver experience as well.
There's got to be, where's our potential? Because 13 seats, 20 seats is not enough. But the, 60 seat or whatever they are, I see them going past my business premises every day, 3-4 times a day, 6-wheelers. No wonder they can't turn. No wonder they're having crashes on the road, etc. when are we going to get to a place where if we don't have a service that people can rely on, it's counterproductive. We might as well not put one bus there and give them this false sense of hope. So when do you think, amongst all our other problems where we've got amalgamation happening, when do you think who is it who's going to pull out some dollars and make this happen?
Well, you remember when we talked, I think it was last year, or might have been the year before, we talked about this topic, where we said that the way that it was contracted at the time, we had to see the contract through, and we're going through re-procurement where they can re-specify in terms of what fleet goes on a particular area. So that's underway, yeah? So to make sure that we got fit-for-purpose vehicles on the right routes.
Thank you. So just one last question then, Mr Chair. So along with the establishment of a new Auckland Transport CCO, we're going to have a look at all our bus contracts, are we?
We're already in the process of doing that, and so I think we reported back last month with tranche 3 where we made considerable savings on that procurement, and we have a few more to go over the next couple of years as well.
Well, I'm really after savings for sure, but if we could get more people on the buses, even though the smaller less seat numbers, like we're just not filling them up, and it's just not. If we got some fare recovery, that'd save money too by having a good service.
No, I agree. I mean, bus services are doing really well in terms of buses, probably the only mode that it's above pre-COVID numbers, yeah, in terms of that. But there has been a considerable investment by Auckland Council with the Climate Action Transport Targeted Rate. That's really proving very beneficial to the network. So we're now up to, gosh, I'm trying to think how many frequent routes we have. Is it 53? Over the last few years. So that you're seeing that uplift in bus users. But again, it's about growing the network over time. And we're seeing that. We're seeing really good numbers come through.
Well, it's patchy, and if I couldn't possibly use the words really well associated with the bus services in Langham without being strung up. So thank you. Julie.
Oh, kia ora, thank you. Thanks for all the info on the intersection cameras and tech and bus boosters and dynamic lanes. That was fantastic. What I'd like to know is how are we using those kinds of technologies around bus lanes, in particular, people who are parking in bus lanes during operational hours, and whether we can ticket them. I know there's a complication with towing them once we get into peak. It potentially becomes more disruptive to tow than it is to leave them there. But what are we doing there? Are we looking at cameras on buses? I know, Stacey, in the past you've talked about point-to-point, but this is something I'm getting from quite a lot of constituents at the moment around the Dominion Road bus lanes in particular. They're about to change hours to the afternoon peak will start at 3 rather than 4. That will help with the towing window. But are we doing something around cameras and ticketing to really drive that behaviour change? There's particular places where people just do it all the time.
We are looking at front cameras for buses. That is one thing we're looking at. I think there's differences in terms of what we can do with the enforcement criteria and how that works, but that is definitely something that we're looking at. I think it does come to that proactive patrols piece though, and how quickly we can do that and make sure they're clear before lane operating hours.
I'd really appreciate a bit more information at a later date perhaps on whether you've got particular routes that you're highlighting, areas with recidivist behaviour where maybe there are conversations to be had with the businesses as well. One of the things I'm aware of through Balmoral, for example, is that I suspect a lot of this is Uber Eats drivers picking up food in the evening peak, yeah. And so actually, ideally we don't want them to get a ticket because we don't want them to be there. There might be a conversation to be had there with the local business association around can there be, there are some service lanes there. I'm just using that as an example. I'm not expecting you to address that one directly. But, because when there are things like Uber Eats drivers, these people are often on quite marginal income. They're going to do the fastest thing they can. And it's difficult to have a conversation with them collectively. So how do we create those loading spaces even in those kinds of environments? The other thing that I wanted to ask about was in the presentation, you've sort of broken things up into sections, and I get that. But some of them, it seemed to me like some of these things could be in multiple sections. So, for example, the urban development slide, the two examples you gave, one was a busway project and the other was an off-road cycling project. Now, both of those also have network optimisation gains, right? And the off-road cycling, I'm familiar with that section of the road, that getting the bikes off there will have a network optimisation for all the users, right? So the busway one, very straightforward. So I think it would be really helpful for us to sometimes understand better what are the co-benefits of some of these. Like we're doing them because of X, that's the work program they sit in, or however you think about it. But actually, it's doing Y and Z as well. And so, for example, I've talked before about how reducing crashes from a safety point of view, right? But also huge network optimization benefits because of, So how do you think you might be able to communicate that stuff better to us through these updates? I would find that really useful.
That's a solid point. And I think, we categorise things using the P3 type scenario. So you've got your projects, you've got your programs, then you've got your portfolios. So that's what you see when it comes here. You've got urban, you've got public transport, etc. And so in terms of that, what we could do, and I know that actually from a particular project perspective, it is categorised into terms of the co-benefits. So we can provide a little bit more information in terms of the overview, I think, in terms of what that project or program does.
Great. And I mean, it might just be a matter of, some colour coding on the side that says, all the network optimisation projects have a green sticker on them, or, like it doesn't have to be a big complicated thing, but just to make visible to us in the community, because there's often this perception that we do things for one reason. That is not my experience around here. There are multiple reasons, but we need to make those transparent, I think. Yeah. Thank you.
Daniel?
Hi, team. Thank you so much. Firstly, can I just, through you, Chair, acknowledge Stacey for being very responsive to my questions. I'm sure that there's probably another process I need to go through, but thank you, Stacey, for indulging me in my constituent inquiries, which have been helpfully addressed by you. With respect to fare box recovery improvements, I'm sure that the closing the gap to go from 33.8 to 30 is going to be quite material, but I'm just wondering if you could provide back to me and others who wish to have this information too, a breakdown slower time as to what the fare box recovery is by PT class, trains, bus and ferries. And I'm particularly interested in the per dollar cost subsidies, because these are quite material figures, I would imagine, that we're talking about, depending on the service. And secondly, are you providing that information through to the Chief Executive to inform forward discussions for the 10-year plan?
Yeah, we do. We report from an SOI in terms of the individual fare box recovery. So we do have that sort of dashboard view, as well as what we call the yield. So the average revenue received from each passenger, take into consideration all the concessions, etc. So that's how we do our own sort of benchmarking in our budgets, and then work up from a patronage perspective, as well as the cost per passenger by mode. Yeah, and so happy to share that information.
Yeah, I think it's quite important for our forward discussions in terms of some of the trade-offs that we're going to face with our budget setting in the next wee while, and I think that's something that Phil Wilson and the Mayor's office need to be aware of, so they can provide that information back to us as well. So, but I'm particularly interested in the fare box recovery by PT classes. My other question, thank you for the fantastic work that's taking place on the PT work in relation to level crossing removals in the south. I noticed that you've got the visual there for Manuia Road Bridge, which kind of looks, which I that's the design that I support too, but I'm wondering if we are actually settled in terms of our design specifications yet, or that's still subject to the conclusion of the consultation, which is ongoing at the moment. But I mean, how soon do you anticipate that we're actually moving from design to construction for that first bridge, which would have to be at Manuia? Because that isn't really future, that's almost, or feels to me like we're getting very close to it. So do you have any information about that beyond near future?
The level crossings program is due to come and give you a briefing in the next month or two around the whole level crossing program, which will give you that information that you're after.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It might come back to me.
Thank you. Joe?
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to ask, great to see the local board numbers there. What about for us as councillors? Do you do the same? Like, you know, what is it, satisfaction scores or whatever?
Yeah, we don't do the same. No, not from that perspective in terms of, so yes, I mean, is that something we should be doing going forward? Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It'll be good.
Yeah, good point.
And also because more is coming over to us to do in terms of transport with the transition. I wanted to ask about public transport safety, and I will take up the offer to meet with Rachel Cara, thank you. But I want to know, is there a way to get immediate response as a passenger when you're on the bus? I'm focused on the bus because it's smaller than a train and it's in far more confined space. And when something is happening, you can't ring 111 because it's too obvious and the aggravator will turn on you. And so I've been using 4030, but that's not instant. You know, it's just really reporting something after the fact. So is there a way to do it, to have 4030 be that immediate connection to 111, or?
I mean, the Crime Stoppers, text number is a great tool for people, but it's not for emergency situations. Yeah, because you're not guaranteed an urgent response in terms of that, because it goes through, when it comes through to us, it's anonymised because it's an anonymous system, in order to get more reporting through the door, which is good because then it gives actionable insights, and then therefore if there is something serious it does go to police. But the number one protocol if there is something serious is 111 always. Yeah.
Mike?
Thank you. First of all, congratulations, Stacey, on the bus driver safety screens. I recall that being discussed some years ago and you being involved in that. When is it likely that we'll be getting close to 100%?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Councillor. So we chose 80% because there is a lot of new fleet coming in over the next few years, and it seemed like a bad use of funding in order to be able to retrofit these to the 20% that we knew were going to be replaced within the next few years. So within the next few years, as the procurement activity increases, they will be phased out, the old fleet. So within 2 years, they will be fully done.
Thank you for that. Another question in terms of public transport and the active modes update. You just about answered this question before. It would seem that by deduction it must be rail and ferry that is lagging behind in terms of recovery. And when we're talking about recovery, presumably we're talking about recovery from pre-COVID 2019-20. Would that be right?
Yeah, correct.
In your comments about buses?
Yeah, so bus is definitely above pre-COVID, but when I sort of look at ferry, it's quite substantially lower, and that's because, of course, we've got a point-to-point network in most of the areas, apart from your gross services of Hobsonville and Pine Harbour, to experience a lot of urban growth. And so because of that, with work from home, that pattern's fundamentally changed. We've seen really good numbers in ferry over the last few months, though. It has improved quite substantially. I think we've had better weather as well. Train, I think, is naturally getting better. It's actually above SOI for train, and that's because we've managed to control some of those closures and having less unreliability as well with that. So once we get to integrating the city rail link and we don't have these massive blocks of line, I think we'll see a pretty swift recovery of trains.
I would agree with you on that. I do feel, obviously, rail patronage has virtually collapsed or gone down by a third, and hopefully it will bounce back once people get used to full services being returned. The other point, though, I think with ferries, ferries have been doing better than officially reported. I might be wrong about that, but the figures in regard to ferry patronage always surprises me, because unlike rail or even buses, ferries seem to have recovered very well, but perhaps it's something to do with wharf taxes and so on, but I won't go there. My other question relates to cycling and the cycling movements. Can AT now differentiate on its counters between cycles and e-scooters?
Yeah, I believe so. I think we can. I will confirm back to you, but I do remember seeing a report on Miola Road and it had differentiated them.
It's something that needs to be checked, I think, and also what mechanisms you have to correct. Obviously, a cyclist will be going over a number of counters, and in the system where you have corrections to cater for that, to get a rigorous. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. John?
Yeah. Thanks everyone. Just a couple of questions in terms of context. Councillor Lee was referring to the different modes, and obviously with something like the mode like the ferry, they had 3 years of chronic disruption as a consequence of the crew shortage after COVID. So not during COVID, but after COVID, which went through to nearly 2025, very end of 2024, before some services were restored. So I think in any comparisons or analysis, I think context is firstly very important. And secondly, so is the choice of data. So if we're going to come back with financials, it will be useful to get the capital costs of the different public transport options, rail, bus, ferry, so that we know what capital investment is going in. Some modes, like the ferries, for instance, have the capital and the operational costs combined in the contract. So obviously, they're essentially getting penalised for that if we're going into this kind of punitive, rather narrow view that some have. And so what is also useful is going to not just the cost per customer metric, which is the one that AT uses, but also the cost per passenger kilometre travelled, which changes the whole diagnosis when you go to that, because we don't want to be penalising long distance travel and treating them as if they're the same as a 2 kilometre trip on a train or a bus with a 29, 30, 35 kilometre travel on something else. That's not a fair comparison. It's not what transport planners do. Okay, so as far as questions go, I just wanted, and it goes to there's a bit of discussion about the dynamic laning, and certainly the area I represent has been one of the outstanding successes, Whangaparua Road, but it has not been without its challenges. And what I want to know, so first of all, there was overwhelming community opposition, including parts of the local board. It was just the heroic councillors of that time who persisted, along with the poor AT staff who had to front some pretty unpleasant meetings. Now, yeah, everyone's a fan. But it is a delicate balancing act between side friction and safety. And what I want to know is, do you revisit even places like Whangaparua Road, which have been really successful, thank goodness for the dynamic laning, but there are still safety issues by virtue
of it being dynamic laned. And I think of instances like where buses can't, so if a bus stops, there's no lane for anyone to go and there's a danger someone pulls out unknowingly. Now, areas like that are very fortunate is that you have people travelling there every day, so they're familiar. Do we go back and review those safety requirements, given that a lot of the dynamic laning has trade-offs, safety-wise?
Through the chair, yes, I think I answered earlier, we do review, so we monitor the dynamic lanes and we do review instances like a bus stopping, any sort of safety instances that occur, and we do from time to time make changes as and when required if we are picking up safety issues with those lanes. And Whangaparo has had its fair share of issues. It's by no means been simple. I think the tech that was also put in there at the outset was very early tech. We had endless problems with that tech, and so it's been quite challenging in terms of maintenance of the legitimacy of all the lights that are in ground there. But I think that we've now replaced all of those, and we've got a far better operating system in place than what we had originally.
And just finally, Mr. Chair, just a compliment to the AT team in terms of, and it's very apt, given the talks about buses. We're in Scott Point, where there's been a lot of problem with the road. AT have responded with an interim solution, listening to the community, which in turn has opened up the possibility to a bus service with smaller buses to utilise that. So thank you very much to the people who have been involved in that.
You've said that. Victoria.
Thank you. Sorry, you quickly touched on the Glenvar Road, East Coast Road safety improvements, or the improvement there. And I think you kind of said, we've restarted the detailed designs on that. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit more? Because it was just kind of touched on, but it is a piece of significant work that we've been advocating for in my neck of the woods for a very, very long time.
Yeah, there's been quite there's been quite a detailed review on the benefits and the costs for that project. Not so much for East Coast Road, but Glenvar Road had quite a cost associated with very few benefits. So the project's been staged now with the focus on East Coast Road and the intersection, with Glenvar Road to be reassessed as the project goes. That's what's happening at the moment. If you want more information, I can get you more information on it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm also completely aware that we had the 2023 floods, which also a significant piece of investment went into that as well. Just also going to be cheeky, but there is that Vaughan's Road and Te Oneroa Road project that is also part of that catchment. Is there any update on that as well?
I believe we had a request come to council a number of months ago about that. The requests, we would like to do them simultaneously because there are a lot of benefits from managing that, but it's currently not funded in the RL2P.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Matt.
It's just a question about the traffic signal optimisation. Is there any intention or plan to bring that kind of operation in-house? I know that we contract that out to other companies, but the development of AI and computer engineers and the like, if we had that in-house, it may be something that we are adapting specifically to Auckland by those that live in the city?
The technologies that we've been investigating have proven capability already in the market. Us doing development and then trying to learn will take us a while to get to where the technology already is and is available. There's always merit in trying to develop product. In this case, I think if we try to develop the product, we would be disadvantaged Aucklanders, and it would cost us a lot more and a lot more effort and time.
No worries, thank you.
Okay, no further questions. Oh, Richard.
Kia ora, sorry, I did put my thing through, but it must not. You might have blocked me. Fair enough. Kia ora, I guess just on a couple of things, and maybe it's when the transition happens to you, Stacey, that we have a bit of a walk around, touch and feel, screens, explanations on some of your work, because I'm a geek and love that stuff, but I think it would help all of us to understand more, like the I often hear empty buses, but there might be an empty bus for the first third of the route, but the last 2/3 you didn't see completely full. Or the fact the trains, when the rail is open, is almost 2019, but when it's closed, it's normally zero because you can't use the train when it's closed. So it would be good to have some of that analytics and data shown. And do you know I know you mentioned before the frequent buses. I count 58 frequent bus routes, but the website says 45. Yeah, so it would be good to have, but also showing, if we could show the committee the increase. So I think 10 years ago there was 10 frequent bus routes. So if we were able to show people where you've staggered, why things connect.
Yeah, no, absolutely, we can do that. We can do a bit of a PT showcase, so to help people understand. You're right. So in 2016, we had very minimal in terms of frequent bus route. So it has changed considerably and substantially. And you're right that the empty bus conversation is one we do have frequently. Great example that you see the diversity in terms of how a bus network works is I took the 75 the other night to get from the office to Newmarket to talk at uni. And within that journey, there must have been, I don't know, 50 people, but some would go just up the road, some would go all the way, some would go further. And so the cycle in terms of people getting on and off is quite huge. And you don't often see that. If you see a point to bus in a journey, you'll see a couple of people on it, but the next stop there might be 30 more, 20 might get off. And so we can take through some of those data scenarios and demonstrate that.
Yeah, and just on the sizes of buses, is my understanding still a bus doesn't stick on the same, is it still the case it doesn't stick on the same route all day? It might, because I know the 814s and stuff, they peel off and they might do a busway and then they come back. Is that still how it's all optimised? That they just...
Yeah, correct. I mean, and a unit is specified and taken into consideration. I mean, obviously Auckland's changed quite a lot since those contracts were specified too. And so specified with a certain number of buses, and those buses go here, there and everywhere and are interchangeable in order to maximise the use of the asset themselves. Yeah, so if you were to specify from an individual route, which we do need to do with some, Scott's Point's a good example, as is Langhome, in terms of that where you do have restrictions, you do get lost asset value because you're not utilising it as much as you possibly could. So we do that minimally, yeah, try and maximise the asset value. Yeah.
Thank you. Just on the skippers and bus drivers, so having this issue with the immigration rules with the bus drivers, do we feel confident that that issue is being ironed out, or that we have a good kind of wriggle room on both the ferries and buses? Because it took a lot of work to get on top of that in 2022, but I would hate for us to suddenly, when public transport's having a bit of a renaissance, thankfully, are you feeling any risk there? Is there any work we need to do with government? Or?
Yeah, there's absolute risk there. There is a national spotlight on it. There's a national bus group. 2027 is the year for Auckland that we will lose about 300, 400 potentially if there aren't other changes. There are other aspects that we need to do to work with the industry. So one of the big things is, of course, in terms of helping international bus drivers, through the system, so to speak. But, some already, when they came here during that time when we had different restrictions in place, acknowledged they were only here for a point of time. So in terms of that, the onus is on the operator in order to recruit towards what they know. But there are stuff happening in the background here, looking at it nationally.
Thank you. And last question, just on, and thinking I've just been to another city that obviously has state government funding, but will there be options going forward, or that you'll put forward as the public transport CCO to local boards or whoever, of different options that maybe aren't public transport, but like I look at those new pedestrian walkways for the level crossings, look at stops, they don't have covers or shelters. Like, is there a way that you could come to us and say, in KiwiRail or NZTA only funding X, but actually would you guys like to fund the shelters, or would you like to fund the lighting? Because I feel like sometimes we just miss that extra bit that would especially get women, young people, like people who might not be okay going to a accessing public transport because there's no shelter and no lighting at 9 p.m. at night, but we actually might get another 10% lift because of that original capital spend. Do you guys get business cases? Just feels like we miss some of the really crucial point-to-point stuff for our public transport.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's one thing that you'll hear public transport people say is that, you know, we're good at the big things, not so much the little things. And so we do have a minor capital program that targets those elements in terms of improved, whether it be walking access, walk up, lighting's a really big one. And we've done a lot of lighting improvements with bus stops this year, retrofitted a lot of bus stops, but it is a work in progress. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, team. Someone like to move the, thank you, Desley. Thanks, seconded Richard. Any discussion? Those in favour say aye, and against, carried. Anyone who wants to join the bicycle movement, I have 2 e-bikes for sale. Just come and see me afterwards. Very good ones too. They're not very well used at all, as you might be able to tell. A very good mountain bike and my wife's bike. Yeah, springs are good on one of them. Right, the next item